Happy Migraine Awareness Month, everybody. I hope you're enjoying all of the videos that we have for you throughout the month. We're talking to some interesting people as part of Thriving with Migraine. This is our chats with people that do interesting stuff and just happen to have migraine. One of those is an award-winning journalist and author, and she's also the national medical reporter for the ABC. Sophie Scott, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
Now, you have to introduce us to your friend sitting on your lap. Is that Sammy?
Oh, yes. Look, this is Sammy. And she doesn't like being missing out on any of the action. So whenever anyone comes to sit to do an interview or something at this desk, she likes to be part of the action. So hopefully she'll be nice and quiet, and she might slink off. But she definitely likes to be part of the action. So cavoodles, they think they're humans. So she's part of the team.
Yeah, absolutely. They are part of the team.
Yeah, she's easygoing and friendly and nice to have around.
Does she know when you're having a migraine attack?
Look, she's great company, and so if I'm sort of sitting on the couch quietly, she'll often come and give me a cuddle, but she'll do that anyway. So she's good company either way, basically.
All right, let's talk about you and your great work first, because you're not just a journalist, you're a great health advocate as well. How about we start with how you got into journalism?
Look, I've always been interested in people's stories and people's experiences. And I either wanted to be a journalist or a psychologist when I was at school. And so what I'm doing now is really a mix of both. I think there's a lot of crossover between journalism and psychology. You listen to people's stories, you have to have empathy, you sort of see different points of view. And but I realized that journalism, because I love writing, and so that was another great passion. And so I was able to bring that together, being a health journalist and writing. And the big thing about journalism is it really is a great platform to make a difference. And so I've seen through different stories that I've done that it's when you find something you're passionate about, journalism gives you a great platform to be able to advocate for change and to see things improve for patients. So pretty much everything I do and every story that I approach is really looking at it from the point of view of a patient, thinking about, is this going to improve outcomes for patients? How important is it that patients know about this? And that's a good lens to see things through, basically. So so pretty much every viewer, every reader is a patient, a potential patient, or if they know someone who's a patient. So that's the sort of lens that I choose stories, and that's how I try to tell the stories, through the view of what it's like to be that person going through that experience. And generally the sort of stories we do are very patient focused. And so that fits well with the way I like to tell stories. So I think that's why I've enjoyed doing what I'm doing at ABC, because we're very much focused on the human experience. And health is I guess that's why I like health journalism. I have been other sorts of journalists. I was a political reporter. I was an entertainment reporter. I lived in LA and did the Oscars and the red carpets and all that sort of stuff. And that was fun in terms of like meeting famous people. But I think the thing about health is that it's at the crux of everything. Like without your health, it's very difficult to function. And so it affects people. And when things aren't going well with your health, it's hard to sort of think about other things. And so
was it like a drive to help people and make a difference that drove you into health reporting, or did you just kind of get given the gig one day and you went, oh, I like this?
No, not really. I lived in the US for 5 years, and when I lived there, I saw I think the US was a little bit further ahead of Australia back then when it came to sort of reporting on health and science. We didn't really have the same culture of reporting on health and science back then. It was quite a while ago. And so I started doing some health reporting from the US. And then when I came back to Australia, I was really passionate about wanting to do that when I came back here. So before that, I hadn't really had any interest in health. And if you had met me as a teenager and a university student, you would have known that. But then once I sort of realized how important health was and how crucial, and I loved journalism, so it's a really good mix of the two things. So being involved with health and being a journalist, it was just a great sort of melding of the two interests that I have. And so when I came back to Australia, I just started doing health stories and science stories, and our health reporter actually had just left, so it was like quite good timing. And it's a sort of one of those almost fake it till you make it things. Like I actually just started doing the stories instead of filing a lot of health stories, and then all of a sudden they sort of, ABC just turned around and said, oh, you know, Sophie's been filing so many health stories, we better give her that job, the medical reporter's job. And so then I just got the job. So I always encourage people, don't, you know, wait necessarily for an invitation for something. If you're passionate about it, just go and do it. Just, you know, we get so caught up and held back by our fears of what's going to happen. If you just start doing it, all of a sudden, like if you want to be a journalist, just start writing, just start being a journalist. If you want to be an advocate for migraines, and then just start doing it. So I'm a big believer in that the sort of the you make it happen sort of approach to life.
So is that what happened with the advocacy work you've done for bowel cancer? You just started doing it?
Yeah, look, I think the bigger profile I got, I did get asked to do sort of advocacy work, and I guess I wanted to put my resources and focus on areas that I felt really needed it, but ones that maybe not the underdogs, but ones that sort of weren't getting the attention that they needed. So bowel cancer was definitely fits into that category. You know, we've got and I'm a big advocate for screening for bowel cancer. That's my main reason to be an ambassador for Bowel Cancer Australia, because we have a very good screening test for bowel cancer. The test they send you in the mail that you get when you're 50, and you know, only a third of people do that test. The rest of them just throw it out. And so it's extremely frustrating from a public health point of view that we have a good test out there. So if you're in that age group and you get the test, don't chuck it in the bin. Do the test. And the same thing, I'm an ambassador for Pain Australia as well. And the same reason, I felt that that's an issue that affects so many people that unless you really know what it's like to live with chronic pain, people don't really have any concept. They think pain's something that's very acute, that you take a, you know, Panadol or whatever, and then you get over it. But there's so much more involved with chronic pain, and I'm very interested in the psychology of pain as well. So again, that was another area that I felt that I had something to offer. I could be of service in that area, and that it needed a more exposure as well.
And we're very grateful you do that work, because it is very important. And hello again to all of our friends at Pain Australia. We are a member of Pain Australia, and we're very proud to have that association. Your books are kind of a bit more in the mental health space, would you say?
Yeah, so the first book I wrote was called Live a Longer Life, and that was really looking at the whole, like looking at aging in a very holistic way, looking at sort of diet and supplements and the science of aging. And then the second book, and of that book, I looked at all different things, and I probably enjoyed writing the psychology chapter on that book. And so when I wanted to write another book, then I really wanted to write one on psychology. And so I looked at the issue of happiness and positive psychology, but really through the lens of grief, like when you're actually suffering and going through trauma, what's going to work to help pull you out of that deep hole that you're in. And so from a very evidence-based point of view, and that was interesting. And I guess that sort of also put me down the track of being interested in mental health. And I've done more stuff in advocating for mental health, and I'm on the advisory committee for the Mental Health Prize, and I host a lot of events to do with mental health, again, because I feel that's an area that even before the pandemic, there's so much need out there in the community for good information. And I wanted to be able to just give as much good information to people as possible. And I think that's what we've seen, that, you know, people, you know, are dealing with a lot, you know, whether it's dealing with migraine, whether it's dealing with something else. And often people don't have an outlet or anyone to talk to about it. And they might go on social media or other forms. And if they can get some good sense of connection and good information, that can make a huge difference to someone's day and really, you know, change how the day goes for them. And so we've very much moved to a digital platform with ABC. And so now I'm putting a lot more of my efforts into social media and having a presence there, because I feel like you've got to go where the audiences are, and the audiences really of all ages now are much more on a digital platform. And so I've focused a lot more of my attention to social media in the past couple of months, or really in the past year or so. And and I've set up a new Instagram account, really focusing on mental health. But there's so many great migraine advocates on social media and Instagram that there's a very good community there as well. And so you really, depending on who you follow, like I follow some amazing migraine people. I follow some amazing psychologists, and you know, it's quite an uplifting. I mean, I guess your social media is what you make of it. It's who you follow. So I always say to people, do an audit of who you're following, and if you're going on social media and feeling, you know, anxious and depressed afterwards, then you need to get rid of all those people and start again, because like I follow lots of people where it's very uplifting and positive, not toxic positive, but just very, it's very yeah, it's very uplifting content, and then you come away from it feeling good and feeling like you've learned something as well. So
yeah, the Insta community in particular is very upbeat. The migraine community on Insta is enormous, and
yeah,
it's really quite interconnected as well. Whereas on some of the other platforms, particularly when you're talking about Facebook groups, it's very localized by, you know, nation or region. Whereas on Insta, there's kind of no boundaries, no borders. And it's just people kind of sharing positive and empowering messages as well, which I think is great.
And I think if you're dealing, when you've got a chronic ongoing condition like migraine, some people don't understand what it's like to live with a chronic condition. And so when you do come across people who understand what it's like, you can get the sense that you're not so alone. I think Sammy's going
to bye, Sammy. Enough.
Yeah, so I think that's what can really make a difference to people, is having that sense of connection. And so you might not be able to meet someone for coffee in real life, but you can at least connect with someone on social media and feel like that they're going through the same thing you are.
It's a very powerful thing. All right, let's talk about your migraine. When were you first diagnosed?
Well, look, I was really quite lucky. I didn't really have migraines at all until probably only in the last 10 years or so. So I really feel for people who've had it their whole life, or, you know, since they were a teenager. So everyone says, or a lot of people say, oh, that if you've had migraine, it'll get better as you get older. Well, I'm the sort of reverse of that. It's actually got worse. It's actually become chronic. So it's probably really only been in the last, I'd say, 10 years, and in the last 5 years, it's become more of a sort of an ongoing health issue for me. So, and I've just had to manage it through medication and lifestyle factors and things like that. But I really don't feel that people outside the migraine community really understand what it's like to have migraine as an issue. They see it as just like a bad headache, and it's just so much more than that. I have a lot of side effects from the medication. So what will happen to me is I'll feel pretty crappy the day leading up to a migraine, and then obviously the migraine itself, and then the next day I'll feel pretty crappy, almost to the point now I'm not being able to work the next day either. So it's really like a 48-hour thing. And that's very different from someone who just might have a bad headache. So I wish we could do more to educate people about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll keep doing our best anyway, to keep trying to explain it. But it is very difficult. If you don't get it, you don't really get it. How often would you get migraine attacks?
Look, it varies. I mean, depending on how I'm going health-wise, I'd say at its worst, it was sort of every week. And one of the things that when I saw a new neurologist last year that was very, very helpful was to actually track how often I was getting migraine, what medication I was taking, whether it was making a difference or not. Because up until that point, I'd sort of wasn't really able to quantify it. But when I was looking at it and having to write it all down, I realized that I was getting a lot more attacks than I thought I was. So back then it was at least probably at least one, if not two a week back then. So, and that was then impacting my ability to do my job properly. So things are a little bit better. I've learned more about some of my triggers. I think you can get a little bit caught up sometimes with the triggers, particularly, and then you can sort of be anxious about, oh, if I have this, am I going to cause a migraine? You know, so I think it's keeping that balance between known triggers and then other things that might potential triggers. Is that what you found as well? Like, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, I kind of passed the point where triggers were even relevant for a very long time, but most of my really bad triggers were things that were very difficult to figure out. So I was able to figure out the easy ones, right? Do not eat that orange. You know, like, that's pretty simple. But my biggest triggers are sorbates, which are food preservatives, which are in absolutely everything. Particularly 202 sets me off every single time. And dust. So dust is really hard to avoid. And I've talked a bit about this, you know, with the Migraine Australia community before, but, you know, I now have a cleaner come in every week to get rid of all the dust so that my house at least is not a trigger. But yeah, trigger management is an important part of the process. But it's also, as you say, it's a balance, right? So there are things you can do, like, for example, if you're about to eat something and you know that's going to trigger you, you can take a triptan before you do. Or you can take an antihistamine. That also works for some people, just to kind of stop the reaction that's going to trigger the attack. And sometimes, you know what, just live life. If you get an attack,
I really like
the
sort of the migraine threshold sort of theory, where, you know, so if you know what your triggers are, you can sort of do to a certain point, but if you go over that threshold, then you're sort of pushing it. And so it might be, you know, diet might be something, stress, you know, eating properly, you know, drinking water. And if you basically throw everything out the window, then you know you're probably going to end up in trouble. But if you manage it to, you know, a good degree, then you've got a good chance of keeping well. But then there's those things where you think you're doing everything right and then it happens. So you've got to be a little bit kind to yourself as well, and realize that we can't always control everything. And one thing I have found very helpful is understanding the psychology of when you are in the middle of pain, because the thing that was getting to me was when you're in the middle of that severe pain of having migraine. Often it's not just dealing with the pain at the moment, but it's the sort of the fear that you have of, like, how long is this going to last? Am I going to feel bad tomorrow? Is it going to be, you know, how long is this going to go on for? And so I found it quite useful to really try to stop yourself or counter those thoughts as much as you can, to really sort of talk yourself out of those thoughts while you're in the middle of having an attack. And it's not necessarily easy to do, but it does help in managing the more sort of, when you're right in the middle of an attack, of making it worse. The pain, sort of one thing, but then also the negative thoughts that most people have during that period as well, is sort of, if you can try to manage that as much as possible. And again, that's where I found having access to good information on social media or reading or whatever works for you can make a big difference. Or it might be like listening to a meditation, or doing like a pain-based meditation, or there's lots of great chronic pain podcasts and things you can listen to. But any little tools that you can have. So when you do have an attack, you've got, okay, what can I do that's going to help me get through the next little while, so that you can ride it out as smoothly as possible. And so that's what I've tried to do, is just sort of have that little toolkit of things I can do to try to you know, minimize it while you're in the middle of it.
So have you tried any of the preventative medications, or are you still just managing it with lifestyle and acute medications?
Well, I'm on a couple of other medications that they give you as preventatives for another condition that I've got. So the medications that sometimes they give you are like some epilepsy medications and things like that. I actually take them for another condition. So when I went to see a neurologist, they're like, oh, we could try you on this or that, but you're already on that. So what they could give me was a little bit limited. And so I haven't gone down the route of having like Botox injections or anything like that yet. So I'm actually in the middle of enrolling in a clinical trial of a preventative treatment. So, and I don't know whether I'll be in the placebo or get the active medication, but so I thought that might be just a good way to sort of well, also it's actually fun being the patient and being in a clinical trial, but just see if that makes a difference as well. So I can keep you posted on that one, let you know how I go. I don't even know if I'll be having I might have the placebo, you never know. So
well, we'll see. If you get the real stuff, let us know how it goes.
Yeah, if I get the real stuff and I don't have a migraine for ages, then I'll know I had the good stuff.
That'll be great to hear. And we always love that new drugs are coming down the pipeline. All right, let's wrap up. What is your number one tip for people who are perhaps struggling so they can try to get to a point of thriving with migraine?
Don't suffer alone. Don't recognize that there are lots of other people going through what you're going through, and reach out and find that community, because that's made a big difference for me. For me, I connected with lots of people on Instagram, and I would suggest that if you're on social media, connect with me. Mine's Sophie Scott, the #2, and then you can have a look at the people I follow. A lot of the migraine community will put migraine in their handle, which is very helpful. So I would say just don't suffer alone and feel like you're the only one going through what you're going through, because there's lots of other people. And if you can find that connection and recognize that there are ways you can feel better, and I think that feeling like you've got that shared human experience can really make a huge difference, that you're not the only person going through what you're going through. And having someone validate how you're feeling, someone that you've never met, that you may never meet, but who's going through exactly what you're going through, can really lift your spirits. So that would be my main thing. Don't suffer alone. Talk to the people around you, let them know how you're feeling, try to get as much support around you as you can. And then find those people who will actually understand what it's like, because they're walking the same walk as you. And there's something to be said for that, for connecting with someone who really understands what it's like to be in your shoes, particularly having a chronic condition, because it's not an acute thing. It's not like just having a broken fingernail that the next day it's going to be back fine. You just never know. It's the uncertainty and the unpredictability of living with a chronic illness. And I think finding a community and a tribe that gets that is very empowering. So that would be my number one suggestion for people.
All right. Thank you so much, Sophie Scott, for making the time.
Nice to see you.